Well, welcome back to ValleyHoopsInsider.com, the podcast, Valley Hoops Insider Podcast. I'm Harry Schroeder. Glad to be with you today. We head into a full weekend of basketball in the Missouri Valley, the Ohio Valley Conference, men, women. It's crazy right now. And the women's side of the Missouri Valley Conference about to hit the halfway point. And I thought I ought to bring in an expert on the women's side of the Valley. She knows the men's side too, but an expert on the women's side, and Kelly Burke, and she joins us today. Does a ton of games for the Valley, both men's, women's, volleyball, softball, track. She's everywhere. Appreciate you being with me today. Kelly, where are you today when we find you? Because I know you travel constantly.
I know. You caught me on I'm actually in my dining room, which is rare. This is not, I know, right? Because January, I think I was only home 4 or 5 days total the whole month. So you just caught me on a week that this is the only light week I have of the entire season. So yeah, I'm getting ready. I'll leave tomorrow for our game in Evansville on Saturday.
It's called Voices of the Valley. We talk to those people that tell you about the league, and that's what why we have Kelly on today. Kelly and I will get to be on the ESPN broadcast of the Bradley-Evansville women's game on Saturday. But Kelly, this is a league that has a lot of top flight teams and a lot of top flight players. Right now, I think it's 6 teams within 2 games of first place. And of course, Belmont and Drake at the very top with just 1 loss apiece. Drake getting their first loss just earlier. Just before we talk about any of the individual teams, give us a little bit of a feel for this season of Missouri Valley Conference women's basketball.
This season, since I have started doing games for the league, which has been a while, this is the most wide open season that I have encountered. And what I mean by that is that there's not a clear-cut favorite or 1 or 2 clear-cut favorites. It feels like right now, as you mentioned, there's literally 6 or 7 teams that could win the league if the ball bounces the right way here the second half of the season. And it just feels like there's so much parity, especially within the top 7 teams in the league right now, which is going to make for a really fun conference tournament because you just have this feeling there's going to be a ton of upsets.
Their teams are, as you mentioned, a number of them have really strong nets and RPIs, Ken Palm ratings and all those kinds of things. It's a really outstanding league. And I've been telling a lot of the guys, the people that I know that pay attention to the men's side, that it might not be this season, but for the last several seasons, the women's side has actually been stronger than the men's side in terms of net rankings and postseason opportunities. It's an outstanding women's college basketball conference.
It's normally a multi-bid league almost every year. And so thinking back to last year, I think we had 5 teams that went to postseason, some sort of postseason tournament. And we've had a lot of teams over the last, I'd say 3 to 4 years. And Missouri State comes to mind, Drake comes to mind, that have not only Belmont that have gone to the tournament, but have won games in the NCAA tournament once they've gotten there.
So this week, last night, we had a game, by the way. Northern Iowa beat UIC, and so that changed things a little bit. But I saw Northern Iowa early in the year, and they had a terrible record early on. They were missing Grace Buffelli. They played a monster, terrible schedule. And oops, they're right in the thick of it. Buffelli is back. They're a game out of first place. Talk a little bit about Tanya Warren and about her team.
Tanya's the dean of the Valley, and you could argue that on both sides. She's the dean of coaches in this league because she's very much like Coach Jake on the men's side that has been there forever, and that's what's so unique about that school. The way they've been able to keep both those coaches who are phenomenal. She's just a great mentor overall. She as soon as I got into the league covering teams for Game of the Week, I mean, she was somebody that reached out. She's taught me a lot about basketball. She's willing to take you under your wing, but she's done a phenomenal job. And I just knew with this year's team, I know it was very frustrating for her and the coaching staff and the team in the non-conference season because they were playing the number 4 hardest schedule in the country. They routinely are playing the Iowas and the Iowa States of the world, and they're playing a ton of Power 5 teams in that non-conference schedule. But they were just devastated by injuries. They had 4 of their 5 starters at one point miss some serious time. You had people that had broken elbows. Grace Buffelli had a broken collarbone, which that's a whole story in itself because Grace, when that happened, and it was like I want to say it was the 3rd or 4th game of the season that she went down. And Tanya was telling me in game it happens, and she's sort of running down the court like this. And
I'm glad we're on video, by the way.
Right? She's so tough that Tanya said to her, she goes down a couple possessions in a row and she scores a couple of baskets. And then Tanya said, Grace, are you okay? And she goes, I don't know, coach. If my shoulder feels kind of weird. And so she goes, I don't think you're okay. And she pulls her out of the game, and then she has a broken collarbone. So
Good
Tanya
night.
was just speaking to how tough. She's literally the toughest player she's ever coached. But not having the MVC preseason player of the year is going to affect things inside, especially when you don't have the interior presence, that 1-2 punch that maybe the Panthers have had in years past. So right now is exactly sort of where I expected you and I to be, because now they're almost back to full strength. They're, they have Bo Felly back, which has been huge, and it's a work in progress. And they're just gaining steam every game. I look at the way they bounce back. They didn't play well against Illinois State. I had that game for game of the week last Thursday, and they did not play well, especially defensively. But then they bounced back against Bradley, have a phenomenal showing, score over 100 points in that game. And then obviously what they did to UIC last week in the defense, or last night, the defense they played against UIC, who's a very good team. This Panthers team is right where they thought they were going to be. And I know their record is deceiving, especially because they went 3-9 in the non-conference, but they're going to be an issue when it gets to the conference tournament.
And they have Drake this weekend. The Bulldogs have been spectacular all year long, and they've got arguably two player of the year candidates on their own team. And they just announced yesterday or the day before they're getting Megan Meyer back, who was a double-digit scorer previously, got injured in the middle of her senior year, sat out, said, I'm done. And all of a sudden they made her eligible. Is that fair? I mean, is it fair for them to be that good and then to add her to the mix?
I tweeted out a little bit ago, because I just saw that this afternoon, and I haven't talked to Allison yet to find out the backstory. But I'm like, oh gosh, every other coach in this league is going to be pulling their hair out, because Drake is already really good. They're certainly one of the favorites to win the league. And they obviously finally suffered their first loss in conference play to Illinois State over the weekend. But adding Megan Meyer to the mix is going to be an absolutely huge addition. And like you said, she had a season-ending injury her senior year. And then I know she was engaged. I'm not sure if she actually got married, but I believe her fiance or husband plays for the Lions. So I don't know if it had anything to do with the Lions postseason run, playoff run coming to an end, that all of a sudden now she's good to be eligible and play, or what precipitated all that. But it's bad news for everybody else in the Valley.
They're 8-1. They have 2 or 3 of the best players in the league, and they add another outstanding player. It's just not fair. No. They play Northern Iowa, gigantic game this weekend. Huge. For the Panthers to try to get a win and give Drake their second loss. I want to stay with the Panthers for just a minute. Maya McDermott is so outstanding. I got to see them up close earlier in the season. I've watched a couple of their games on TV as well. Just a terrific point guard. Maya McDermott does a lot for them, but she's an outstanding point guard.
She's unbelievable. The game I had against Illinois State, she single-handedly kept the Panthers in that game in the second quarter. There's one stretch where she had 9 straight points in the second quarter when it had ballooned to an 18-point lead for the Redbirds, and it was at risk of going to 20, 30-point lead for Illinois State. She absorbs contact so well. She gets downhill. She's very shifty,
athletic.
And she's been playing so long. She understands matchups, and that's what she really exploited against Illinois State. Is she got on the two-man pick and roll. She got the matchups and defenders she wanted switched on her, and then she just got to the basket. So she just has that ability. And she's another player for you and I that has not been 100% healthy this season. She still realistically is not 100% healthy. She's had some back issues that have really bothered her. And so that's something that she navigates every day. But she's so dangerous. And you talk to opposing coaches and they're like, I hate having a game plan against her because she's so smart. And she's just that point guard that every team wants to have.
Going back to Drake for a minute, and then we'll move on to some of the other teams. Dinabir is maybe, I don't know, she's got to be right there for the player of the year. She leads them in scoring and assists and steals and this, that, and the other thing. And she's number 1 in the league in scoring, number 1 in the league in assists. Talk about her and her game and what makes her so dangerous.
her ability to get to the free throw line. She reminds me a lot on the men's side of Xavier Johnson and his ability, like when you compare the two, like they both absorb, it seems like they get better with contact driving the lane. And so she can just hit some crazy shots, crazy angles when she's getting to the rim. And she's number 2 nationally in free throws made. So if that tells you anything, but it's honestly, you look at all her offensive numbers. And again, this is on a high powered Drake team that, they run that 5-out motion offense. So it's pick your poison on any given night. But her defense is probably what impresses me the most. And Drake runs that 2-3 matchup zone. And she's just feisty. She gets in passing lanes. And again, keep in mind, Drake's not even playing a straight man-to-man defense, but she leads the league in steals despite that. And she will get in your face. She plays great on-ball defense. She takes so much pride in the defensive end of the floor.
Belmont's tied for first. They were, of course, the conference champions with Illinois State a year ago. They were 8-1. They lose 2 young ladies to the transfer portal to power conference teams, and all Bart Brooks has done is put them right back and tied for first place. They've got some outstanding guards as well. You think about Tootie Jones and the rookie Banks. Talk a little bit about the Bruins.
The Bruins, I would say, coming into the season, they were one of the teams that probably everybody had the most question marks about, given that they lost Destiny Wells to Tennessee, and then Madison Bartley transferred to Baylor, 2 really good women's basketball programs. But they've just reloaded, and it again speaks to what great coaches Bart and his staff are, and the way that they're able to seamlessly. I mean, it looks seamlessly. He would tell you it's not been if you talk to him, but they just. I think the part that impresses me the most is how good they've been defensively in Valley play. They're giving up less than 55 points per game, and
they're the number 1 defensive team in the league. Yeah,
and this is against teams that the league has become way more offensive on the women's side this year. Murray State, number 4 nationally, they average right at 90 points per game. Drake, over 70 points per game. Illinois State over 7. Like, there's a lot of really good offensive teams in the Valley, and Belmont's played those teams already. So that 55 points per game is playing a lot of those teams already. So it just speaks to how good their defense has been. And then just the way that they develop players. Tessa Miller comes to mind as one of them. Kendall Cheeseman, all players that they were good last year, but they sort of took a back seat to Bartley and Wells, especially Bartley in the post area, and the way that Tessa Miller has developed her game and become one of the go-to players. Then you add Jalen Banks, who is one of the heavy favorites to win Freshman of the Year.
She's going to win it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she'll get a little bit of competition, but she's definitely the heavy favorite because she's been the most consistent from start to finish this year, even dating back to the non-conference season. So, they're really good. And what's amazing to me is the way they've sort of been able to seamlessly transition from the OVC to the MVC. And that's no disrespect to the OVC on the women's side, but it's a pretty big level up jump to the Missouri Valley Conference from that women's side of things on the OVC. So they dominated the OVC, and I don't think people expected them to come in and be so equipped to be right in the mix their first year, last year, and even this year. But that's all they've done. They just reload every year.
Murray State struggled a bit a year ago, and Rochelle Turner just said, well, let's just play differently. Let's go run up and down and score a bunch of points. They and Belmont face off this weekend, the highest scoring team in the league against the best defensive team in the league. But Rochelle Turner's done a terrific job, and of course, she's building around a pretty talented player in Caitlin Young. Coach
Turner is one of my favorite coaches to talk to. She doesn't realize how funny she is. I've always said when I'm on broadcast for their games, you just need to put an ISO camera on her the whole game because she's so animated, especially just reacting to officials. She'd be hilarious to ISO. But really incredible what Murray State has done. And in talking to Rochelle, in the off season, she was trying to figure out a way to compete in this league. And what she realized is it could not be done in half court basketball because Murray at the time was only averaging about 55 possessions per game. And they just didn't have the personnel to be able to compete in the half court. So she recruited her husband, herself, and then it was another friend. And they looked at the analytics of everything. And they decided that the best decision they could make would be to switch to up tempo. So now they try to average 25 points per quarter, 80 field goals per game and 100 possessions per game. So I was curious how it would hold up in conference play, but for the most part, it still has. They're still averaging about 90 points per game. You look at the caliber of teams, so they're right at sort of that 90 points per game mark. And the only 3 teams that are above them nationally is LSU, Iowa, and South Carolina. And those
teams are pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. So, it's just incredible to watch the pace of play. I had their game on Sunday, game of the week, when they played Missouri State. Again, and Missouri State's number 2 defense in the league. Mm-hmm. So they were not able to play exactly the pace of play that they wanted to, especially in the second half. Missouri State did a good job of preventing that. But Murray State, they've got a lot of good young players that have come in too. Their bench is number 1 in the country, averaging 40 points per game, just incredible. They have a really good backup point guard in Haven Ford that was Miss Kentucky basketball that Murray chased all around the country on the AAU circuit, trying to get her to come to their school. And then you have Caitlin Young, who this speaks to the unselfishness of Caitlin Young, who has been incredibly loyal in an age where the transfer portal is become synonymous with college basketball. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about loyalty? Talk about Caitlin Young. I'm sure, I have not talked to her directly about this. I haven't asked her this directly, but I'm sure she has been offered I'm sure she's had money. Money. I'm sure she's had a bunch of Power 5 schools coming after her. She just hit 2,000 career points. She's coming back next season, which a lot of coaches don't realize. She's got one more year, and she's already told coach she's going to be back.
Good for her.
She could get to 3,000 career points, which would put her in Caitlin Clark territory.
Yeah.
Pretty special. And keep in mind, she's doing it this year. Last year, she was playing 40 minutes per game. This year, she's only playing about 26 minutes because Murray State, their sort of MO this year is Coach Rochelle asks you, she asks you to play 2.5 minutes to 4 minutes max. And I want you to go all out. I'm not asking for perfect execution. I'm asking for perfect effort. And then it's like hockey line changes in basketball, and she subs you out. So Caitlin's playing a lot less minutes, but she's still getting about the same production, which just speaks to her efficiency.
When you talked about their bench, 40 points a game for the Racers, I was looking over this. Young Ford Pena Lerna, I think is her last name, and Stewart.
Ava Lerna, yeah.
They've had 5 different players win some kind of Player of the Week award.
Yeah.
So, everybody on their team is playing and being productive. It's super, super fun to watch. And the novelty of a coach saying, okay, we weren't very good last year. We didn't compete very well. I guess we'll just change everything that we're doing and have it be successful.
Yeah. The part that has been so impressive to me that I asked Rochelle about is that she's for 25 years, she's been a defensive minded coach.
Yeah.
And I said, coach, because on defense now they full court press. But it's not a full court press to create turnovers. It's just a full court press to speed you up so you take a quick shot because they want to keep the pace of play up. Yeah. And so she said, we're actually trying to funnel teams into taking layups. Like they just don't want you to take transition threes. So they want you to score quick. And so I said, I asked her, how difficult has that been for you adjusting to like being on the sideline and when the other team gets an easy layup in transition off your press that you're not reacting? And she goes, it's been an adjustment. It's been an adjustment because normally if this was last year, I would be all over my
screaming
team.
At him. Yeah.
Yeah. So, props to her for but she also said, besides the fact that it's been a huge adjustment, it's also reinvigorated her as a coach because she's had to completely change her mindset about how she coaches and they play.
Folks, do you hear all the stuff she's telling us? That's why I got Kelly Burke on. She knows this stuff. You mentioned their game against Missouri State, and I saw Missouri State early on when they were just coming out. They started a little slow and then started, playing much better, and they've just continued 7-2 now in the league. Beth Cunningham's done a great job. They're a dangerous team to me because they've got some size. And obviously, Lacey Stokes, people are excited about what she's done at the point for them. But they've got a lot of pieces and a lot of size. I think they're a dangerous team here in the back half of the season.
I think if I had to choose the 2 most dangerous teams right now, I would say it's Missouri State and Illinois State for totally different reasons. Missouri State as I mentioned earlier, number 2 defense in the league. They're right behind Belmont. But then that interior presence they have a lot of very young post players that are still a little bit raw, but have that potential in any given game to give you a double. And then Lacey Stokes has just been a complete game changer for them. And her assist to turnover ratio is insane right now. I mean, she just does not turn the ball over. And Missouri State, I mean, they were coming into this offseason because Anaya Thomas, she graduated. And so that was their, star point guard that not only ran the show, but also scored the ball. And so they didn't have a point guard coming into this season. So getting Lacey was absolutely huge. And then the contributions, though, that they've been able to get from their freshmen is crazy. Kira Daniels is who comes to mind.
Really come on.
But, Beckemeyer had a great outing against Belmont and Murray State. They have a handful of freshmen, 3 or 4, that are starting to really make contributions. And, they have a good bench that's contributing too. So I completely agree. I think, and they're shooting the 3 ball a lot better this year. Last year, they were like lower than 250th in 3-pointers made per game. This year, they're hovering right around the top 50 mark. So that's been a difference too, is because they like to pound the ball inside, but they also have shooters, that if the interior presence is being taken away, you can kick it out and they can knock down the 3.
And I think Stokes is a good player. But I think maybe in addition to that, she just kind of makes them go. She kind of wills them into a position of success. I mean, more than just her talent. She's a good player, but the way she competes actually takes them to a whole different level.
Yeah, it reminds me, I was talking about this with Scotty Warman the other day because we were on their game. And it's been interesting because it's different players, but similar in the sense that so Paige Robinson last year at Illinois State, Division II transfer, comes in at the point guard spot and scores the ball, completely changes that Redbirds team. Same thing with Stokes, different way. Stokes does a great job of managing the game. Like if you're going to let her score, she will. But if you're going to take away her scoring, she does such a good job of finding her teammates. She just literally understands defenses so well. And then that tough, hard-nosed, defensive-minded Missouri State defense, the Lady Bear defense that they're known for, that they've always played. And she's very much like Paige Rocca in that sense, like just gets in your face, plays tenacious D, kind of like a gnat that just doesn't go away, that you're like, God, get away from me. Like, I don't want you guarding me. You're driving me nuts.
So of the rest of the teams that are in the hunt right now, you think of UIC and Illinois Chicago, and I mean, that's the same team, and Illinois State. They're both really dangerous. And I think also you mentioned Illinois State maybe being that other dangerous team. They're the defending conference champions along with Belmont, and Kristen Gillespie just knows how to win. And they might have the best point guard. We've talked about point guards, but they might just have the best point guard in the league in Wong. Deanna Wilson's spectacular. They've got talent.
They do. And they've been rounding into 4. They had to be able to beat Northern Iowa and Drake back to back. That is, I mean, that's very impressive, especially, they weren't happy, coming off the game before against UIC, which was a total foul fest. But the key for Illinois State is you got to keep Deanna Wilson out of foul trouble. She is, if anybody's going to challenge Dinabir and potentially Bofelli for, depending on what Bofelli does down here the rest of the way for player of the year, Wilson's name has got to be right in the conversation, because she completely is a game changer for this Illinois State team. Her ability, and it's not just what she does offensively. I mean, she probably has the best, if not the best footwork in the league for a post player, one of the top 2 or 3 players in the league. And she rebounds the ball, but she takes charges too. She draws a lot of offensive fouls, which I know drives opposing coaches nuts. I have a lot of coaches telling me, "Oh, we got to get a flop, called against her." But she does a really great job of selling it to officials and being in position because she moves really well laterally. So, Deanna D, I mean, I know her pretty well. She's got a great personality. This, and what people don't realize, because you think about Maya Wong on that team and Wilson, and those are veteran older players. There's 2 to 3 older, Kate Bullman, another, those are sort of the 3 veteran presence on that Redbird team. But when you look at the rest of the roster, this Illinois State team is very young. They're completely different than last year when Paige Robinson carried so much of the scoring load. This year, it's a lot more like when Illinois State has been really good, like this past weekend, it's because they've been balanced scoring the ball. Wilson has stayed out of foul trouble. And then you have a great bench. Speaking of Murray State having the top bench in the country, Illinois State has a great bench too that's rated top 10, top 20 in the country that is getting a lot of contributions out of it. And so that's become a huge factor. Shannon Dowell is another freshman who will definitely be on the all-freshman team that has really come on strong since got her first start about 5 games ago. And she's a problem just with her length and, just in the open floor, she's very, very talented. So there's just a lot of freshmen and underclassmen. Abby Alsma's shooting the ball really well right now from 3 for the Redbirds. So when Illinois State can be balanced like that offensively, they're incredibly dangerous. And then as you talked about Wong, I enjoy Maya because her role has completely changed this year. She's had to score the ball a lot more. She was primarily just a distributor in the past, but I always say that she's got that old man at the Y game where she's not the fastest player. She's not the most athletic, but she's so crafty in the lane and she has this ability. She's one of the best in the league at drawing fouls. And so she's going to be that 40-year-old playing in the rec YMCA basketball league. And she's going to drive you nuts because she's going to be really good.
It's amazing, isn't it? The way these different players evolve and develop. Tell us a little bit about UIC. Coach Bracey's done a great job there for the couple of years. And again, they have a lot of talent as well. They've got Valpo this weekend, but talk about UIC.
UIC, I've just been impressed with the way Ashleen has completely been able to transform that program in less than 2 years. And this year, last year they were good. And they made one of the biggest jumps in the country as far as, going from losses to wins. I think they were like plus 18 in wins when she took over. But it was all about the defense last year. And yeah, their defense is still good, but now they have a really good offense too. And so they can score the ball. And they have like 10 newcomers on the team. They got a lot of experienced transfers, some from DePaul and like Big East School, Marquette, so they have a lot of really good transfers that have come in that can score the ball. And so that's what makes them so difficult to scout, is because on any given night, you've got 7 or 8 different players that can lead you in scoring, which is a nightmare as an opposing coach to have to scout and prepare for defensively.
Let's talk a little bit about the game you and I have Saturday. Mm-hmm. Between the two teams, Bradley and Evansville, they have 1 conference win.
Right.
1.
I know.
And so some people might, somebody asked me today, they said, why are you doing that game? I said, listen, these young ladies, these coaches, they work hard like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And don't you think this is the classic game for these two teams? I mean, they're both looking and saying, man, some of these other teams might be a lot better than us, but this team we're playing today isn't. They're not a lot better than us, and this is our chance to really do something. Both these teams have been hit by injury, Bradley mm-hmm. and Evansville, and both of them seem to be figuring it out a little bit here as we get closer to the midway part of the season.
They are. What's impressed me about both of these teams is how hard they play. As you mentioned, they're both extremely young. Bradley starts 3 freshmen. Evansville basically the same. Mm-hmm. And have both have been ravaged by injuries. Evansville a little bit more so early in the season, but they still have some key people injured. Bradley definitely still has key people injured. So it's just going to be an interesting juxtaposition, Harry, because Evansville wants to pound the ball inside. They've got 3 viable post players. Mm-hmm. They do a good job of playing with pace, getting up and down the floor and getting to the free throw line. And then you have Bradley, who's much more defensive minded. Coach Pop, much more of a defensive minded coach. Before she became a head coach, she was under Joe McEwen at Northwestern, which if for anybody that follows women's basketball, runs this blizzard defense, which is like a matchup zone that, is really difficult to figure out if you're an opposing offense. So she's taken a lot of those defensive principles. Bradley will mix things up on the defensive end between man-to-man and a matchup zone at times. So they're going to slow the tempo down. They're going to look, they have a great freshman point guard. They really have 2 point guards, but Hallie Polk loves to penetrate into the paint, and she's got really great vision. does a lot of no-look passes to her bigs. So Bradley, a much smaller team, they'll go 4 guards a lot. So that's going to be the interesting matchup between the two, is like complete opposite styles of play. But like you said, I mean, this is kind of both teams' Super Bowl right now, because, you know, you've got a great match, like a real opportune chance here to get a very difficult to come win in the Valley. That's, you know, we talked about the parity and how wide open it is the top of the league, but the bad news for the bottom of the league has just been the league overall has elevated so much that what used to, you know, like if this was 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, what Bradley and what Evansville are doing now, you could have gotten to 7-8 wins in conference, but the league is that much better now that there's just not a large margin for error at all.
When you look at Bradley, when they lost Nelson early, their leading scorer, they were 2-3 at the time. One of the losses was an overtime loss. The other 2 were by less than 10 points. So they're 2-3 with 3 narrow losses. They lose their best player, and they're 3-12 since then. I mean, it's you just do the math, right? You know,
yeah.
But they have been figuring it out. You can see the scores are tighter. The different people you talked about, Polk, she's had 19 points her last 2 games in a row.
I mean, look at what they did against. They played Drake tough in that game. You know, like and that's Drake that at the time was unbeaten, and they still only have 1 conference loss, and they played Drake really tough.
Yeah, and then you look at Evansville, and they're young, and they've lost some people, but some of their young players are really interesting. I think of you know, Thomas and others that look like they're going to be real, legitimate Missouri Valley players.
Absolutely, Navia Thomas, you know, Hartwig. Like, there's just they've got a lot of Kennedy Mason Stuyvesant. Keep in mind, she's only a sophomore, so a lot of tools there. A lot of pieces to build around. And, you know, as Coach Robin Sherrells showed last year with the big improvement, Evansville, you know, into double-digit wins, like, she's building the program the right way. The bad news for Evansville was just you lose a player like Abby Fight, who is a program changer, who, you know, for her grad transfer year goes to Mizzou. And then you have a lot of seniors that graduated off that school. You lose 4 of your 5 starters. So, of course, you're going to be in rebuild mode, and then you throw injuries into the mix, and it's an uphill battle. But Evansville, you know, is certainly trending in the right direction, and they play hard.
And even, as you mentioned, Elena Stuyvesant's still out with concussion issues, so they're still not all the way healthy. It's going to be fun to work with you tomorrow. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a lot of fun to be in Evansville, and I've got the scouting report about where I can go sit and work once I get to town. So
good. You'll have to share that with me.
I know where I'm going in between shoot around and game time.
Nice.
Appreciate your time. So you mentioned player of the year kind of people. And obviously Dinabir is one of those people. Deanna Wilson is one of those people. Has Buffelli missed too much time to be one of those people? She's played a lot in conference, not all of the games, and missed most of the non-conference. Is she going to have enough time, or is she going to get Joel Embiid out of the MVP talk?
I would say it's going to come down to how UNI finishes the conference race. If UNI inserts themselves right until the very end of potentially winning the regular season, then she has to be in that conversation. And, you know, one thing Tanya talked about with me is that she's continually told Grace, Grace, you got to give yourself a little bit of grace, because you've been out for so long. You're literally playing your way back into condition and like playing shape right now. And Buffelli's a player that normally is so efficient, and her numbers are still really good. I mean, she's still pretty much every night right now going off for like, if not a double right there. So I think she's got to be in the conversation, but it really is going to come down to, is Northern Iowa, are they in the conversation for a regular season title?
So I think of those 3 players, is it Caitlin Young, and who else might be the top 5 players? Who else am I missing when I think about it? Is it Burke or someone else?
No, I mean, I think, you know, I think it's really those 4, like the 4 you said, you know, and the front runners is certainly Dinenbeer and Wilson. Those are probably the front 2. You know, Young is probably, she's in the conversation, but because, again, they're playing a much different style, whereas before Caitlin Young was Murray State's primary offense. I mean, you look at last year, she had 43 points against Drake. The message was like, get the ball to Caitlin, let her go to work. This year, it's like every different game they're having a different leading scorer. So she's literally been she's had to be way more unselfish. And that's the thing that's been so impressive is she's completely bought in and said to Rochelle, whatever it takes, I just want to win. Like, I don't need to score the ball as much. So her numbers, they're still up there, but they're not quite as high as in past years. And it's because they haven't needed her to carry the offensive load as much. So.
Well, I look forward to seeing you on Saturday. We're Bradley at Evansville. It's 5 p.m. start, and look forward to hanging out with you on Saturday and seeing the ladies play. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. Thanks, Harry.
That's Kelly Burke. She is a basketball savant. You heard it all here for the last half hour. Appreciate her time today. Remember, man, we're just going to be bringing you content constantly here on ValleyHoopsInsider.com. So remember, since you've been there, make it a better place. We'll see you again real soon.